Karibu everyone. Welcome to this discussion on Ubuntu and its place in social work and development. Once again, my name is Eria Tuyamreba, joining in from Uganda. And today we have someone who is also going to be sharing more about Ubuntu and its place in social work and development. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Susan Muchiri, Head of Department of Social Work and Community Development from Hope Africa University in Burundi, right in the heart of Africa, and where social work needs to be practiced and continue being spread throughout the East African region. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you so much for that ample introduction. And right now we are going to dive into the different themes that are going to get this discussion. And the first theme is about your early understanding of Ubuntu. And the question I have for you is, how was Ubuntu explained to you or demonstrated to you as a child while growing up?
Yeah, so I think we need to start from what Ubuntu means. Okay, I think we've heard of this philosophy of Ubuntu growing up, that you are because I am. Okay, that people in the society are because others are. You cannot exist alone. You cannot exist in a vacuum. You know, it's all about community. So I think as I was growing up, Ubuntu was demonstrated to me by the way we lived with each other, the way neighbors lived with each other in interconnectedness. I think, you know, in many contexts, in our African context, in many of our places, you are not isolated. You don't live in isolation, but you live in connection with others and in community with others. So you always know that you always have a support system, you know, a strong support system. And I think those are the roots of the philosophy of Ubuntu, that a tree cannot be a tree because you need others around you. Yeah, so that's how Ubuntu was demonstrated in the way that we live with others in our community.
Yes. Thank you so much. My next question building on that is, who in the community embodied or personified or exemplified Ubuntu for you while you were growing up?
Yes, I think mostly parents, because, you know, those are the most significant people in our lives. Those are the people who raise us and are in constant contact with us. So I talk about my parents as exemplifying Ubuntu in the community. And then after that, now we go into the schooling system where we get the teachers. And, you know, once being in the schooling system, you work together. And, you know, we have what we say, we have a proverb in Africa which says, it takes a whole village to raise a child. So those are all these people who are around the children who help us to be able to reach where we are today. So apart from parents and teachers, I think we also talk about peers and friends around, because the friends whom you have are able to help you and to raise you and to give you direction. If you have friends who are good friends, they can be able to pinpoint you in the right direction. So those are the people that I can mention had an influence. And then, of course, as you continue growing up, you continue now getting other good support systems within wherever you are. You start getting good, you continue getting friends, for example, then you go to work and you get colleagues. All these play a part in promoting that Ubuntuism for an individual. Yes.
Could you briefly share about what those parents were doing that really exemplified Ubuntu to you, just briefly?
Yes, I think if you look at, okay, if I talk about my parents, we had good connections with our neighbors. If neighbors needed anything, we were able to help each other. When neighbors, for example, would go and they need their children looked after, we would stay with the children. I remember my mom always having classes for young children at home. You know, all children, like on Saturday, children would come home and we have sort of like a class or Sunday school, something like that, where children can be able to get to participate together. I think, yeah, those are some of the ways that I could see Ubuntu being demonstrated.
Thank you so very much for those insightful examples. My next
Yes.
question to you is about Ubuntu in learning, and under the theory of education under Ubuntu, learning happens in the family, it happens in the community, it also happens in the environment, meaning families, communities, and the environments are teachers. That is under the theory of learning or education in
Yes.
Ubuntu. So we would like to find out from you. Could you please share about your experiences with the Ubuntu, the theory of education under Ubuntu, where education happens in the community, in the environment, and everything, and the families, and they all act as teachers to you. Could you share briefly about that?
Yes, I think that's a very important concept, understanding that it is not only the formal learning which plays an impact in education. When we look at children, where do they start learning? From the basic etiquette of society, for example, we start at home. You know, we start with the parents, we start with the mother, we start with the father, and we have what today we are calling informal education. But you know, it has a very large part to play in terms of, yes, you can have the formal education, but if you don't have the basic informal education, you will not make it in life. And this is what we are taught from the base. So when we look at education, Ubuntu is very important because it is not only our parents who play a role. For example, even the people who surround us, we're talking about neighbors. Neighbors are also educators. Of course, with the change and then with the change of generations, we have people today, for example, you know, my neighbor cannot discipline my child. But if we look at back, if we look at history, even if a parent was not available, we had neighbors, we had uncles, we had aunties. All this support system were the education for the child. And when we leave the parents, we go to the neighbors. When we leave the neighbors, we go to friends. These are people who children spend a lot of time with when they are from, for example, from 1 to 5. And this is where they get their basic education, which is going to help them know how to survive in school, you know, because from 0 to 5, they are learning about conflict resolution. They are learning about, for example, finding solutions. They are learning about friendship. They're learning about developing each other. They're learning about supporting one another. All this just at the basic societal level. So I can give an example. A child, you know, children are usually born egoistic, but we start teaching the child, no, can you give me your piece of meat? It is not because I want the piece of meat. It is to help the child to start learning the basic concept of life, the value of everyone. What I have, I can share with others, you know? So many times we would think, oh, the parent just want, no, it's just to help that child because, you know, there are some certain things which you hold value, and meat is one of them. So when the child is able to learn that I can share this, then the child starts learning that this is life. I will need to share with others. And slowly they let go of the egoism. And so when they reach the age of entering now formal education, we already have that aspect of basic education already set, you know, because there is not much the teachers can do at 6, 7. You know, the base has been already set. So all aspects of society, all support systems of society are very important in helping a child get education right from the base up to now when we have this formal education.
Thank you so very much for sharing those insights on Ubuntu and education, while it happens in family and communities as well as the environment. Now we are going to our next theme that is guiding this discussion, and it's about your African tongue and cultural practices that depict Ubuntu. And my question to you is, what words or concepts depict Ubuntu in your language? Could you share some of the words or concepts that depict Ubuntu, plus their meanings from your culture, from your area, and from your language?
Okay, so here in Burundi, we have, for example, a proverb which says, Umunu ni umunu n'abantu. That means a person is a person through other people or by other people, you know? So we have this concept that your value, the value that you, or who you are, is because of others who have been able to support you. So when we look at every aspect of culture, whether be it marriage, be it birth, okay, the major rites of passage of life, they are all done in partnership with other people. You cannot get married, for example, without other people. It's very difficult. Birth also involves other people, because it is a ceremony. It is a ceremony of welcoming another person in the society. When we look at death, death is also implicated. Ubuntu is also found in death. So when we look at all the aspects, even the transition from childhood to adulthood, we need others in our society who are going to help us. So we are looking at it, a person, umunu, ni umunu. A person is a person through abantu, other people who surround him. Yes.
All right, thank you so much. And besides those concepts that depict Ubuntu, are there any other maybe songs or sayings or proverbs that you could wish to share, or rituals or ceremonies that happen that depict or that showcase how Ubuntu happens in communities from Burundi?
Yes, for example, in Burundi, on Saturdays, we have what we call Ibikoga Rusangi. And Ibikoga Rusangi is about building the community. So what happens is that the origin was community development. And the origin was that people would come on Saturday together, Saturday morning. Up to today, it still takes place, that people come together to be able to clean their neighborhoods, to build a school, to do an activity which brings them together to develop their community. So it can be, for example, if in times past, it would be, for example, tilling the land. It would be, for example, if there's lack of a building in the school, in a community, the community members come together to find a way of getting their hands together to build the school. If a clinic was needed, community members come together. Then as time has passed, today it's usually used in terms of cleaning the community. So for example, if you see that your community, the environment is not clean, what people do on Saturday, they take that time. So what happens is that everything is usually closed up to about 11, as people come together and gather together to develop their community in terms of keeping the environment clean. So it is a form of eco-social work or eco-community development, because we know that the community, the environment also relies on us to be able to protect it. So this one is still taking place up to date, but though the ideas have changed, today it's more of cleanup, but at the root was this trying to develop the community through building schools and finding other important aspects of the community which are missing and which people can come together to develop.
Thank you so much for sharing those insights. We are now going to the other theme that is about Ubuntu in everyday life. And according to their theories of aging, both Dr. Uzoma Odere Okeye from Nigeria and Professor Andrew Nyanguru from Zimbabwe, they emphasized the positive contribution of older adults in building the family and society. So we would like you to share about what you think about what they said in regards to the positive contribution of older adults in building the family and society in regards to Ubuntu. Would you share your experience about that?
Yes, I think it's very important, and this is a very critical aspect of society, because remember, we all pass through all these stages. This is a stage of development. So we start from childhood, we go into adolescence, we go into adulthood, young adulthood, middle adulthood, and then we reach aging. And at all these aspects of development, there's a critical role that we play in the society. So even in aging is a very important development in our society, because remember, these are people who have experience. Remember, these are people who have lived experiences, because today we also talk about lived experience. So what they're bringing to the table for us in the community is their wealth of knowledge, their wealth of experience, their wealth of knowledge which they have, and all that can be able to help us to know the right way in which we can continue. Because remember, without this wealth of experience, without this wealth of knowledge, some of these things we will take a wrong turn. So their role is to help us to know which turn can we take. And it is sad that today we do not value aging. Whereas where aging is wisdom, it shows wisdom. You know, the gray hairs show that this individual has reached a senior level in society. So I think what we should do is embrace the elderly, give them that role to play, give them that role to play of helping us to know what do we do in such a circumstance? What do we do at such a level? What do we do when we have a problem? For example, if we look at our traditional societies, I think there was a lot of value for the aged, because remember, as I've said before, these were the people who would pass on the knowledge. And that's why we had a lot of oral knowledge being passed on from generation to generation. Now, when we lower their value today, they will keep their knowledge with them. And therefore, we have a gap. We have a gap between what we know and what we have now. So this gap is going to make us commit a lot of errors in our society, which we would have avoided if we had that knowledge from our elderly people. So I think it's important, the way the two authors have mentioned, that in Ubuntu, we need to put that respect back in aging, knowing that all of us are going to pass through it. There is no one who is going to escape it. And how would we want the society to view us as the aged? Remembering that even as we are passing, we are gathering knowledge, we are getting experience. These are things which we want to share with others so that we make our societies better, because we learn through the experience of others.
Just maybe to build on that, here in Uganda, we usually have sessions where older people come and maybe gather like at a fireplace, and they tell stories, they share their insights about what happened previously before, and what they think, what they think about the current situations in the country, and how it can actually impact the lives of people and young people especially. So are there such sessions that also happen in Burundi, where maybe older adults sit down young people and talk to them, share their wisdom, share their insights? Could you also share something about that, or an experience of what you've gone through like that?
So here we have what we call the Bashingantai Institution. The Bashingantai Institution was a group of the elderly, especially men, who were put in place in the society to help in terms of development of the community, to help in terms of if there was conflict, to help in all aspects of the community at the grassroots level. Okay, and then we had the Umufa Soni. Umufa Soni is a lady, a wise lady in the society. So we had these women and men. Bashingantai are the men, Umufa Soni, Abafa Soni are the women. So these women and men were there to help the young ladies and the young men in terms of different problems. If they had problems in marriage, if they had problems in community, if they had problems in raising children, you know, all these issues which come about when people are together. So today, it is not so strong as it was before, of course, because of a lot of issues. You know, as we develop, there are some aspects of our culture which are eroded, but they are still there. And as I've said, not with the strength which was there before, but they are still there, and they still help, and they still step in the society where needed. And they still step in marriages where needed, especially if couples are going through difficulties, if children are having, if maybe families are having behavior problems with children, they can still go to Abafa Soni or the Mushingantahe to help them. Yes.
Thank you so much for those insights about Ubuntu and how it was experienced during the time when older adults come to share knowledge, and how it is still going on. So we are now going to our next theme of discussion, and our next theme is about Ubuntu in development. And the first question I have here is about how Ubuntu is helping in enhancing development. And according to Mzee Kenneth Kaunda, he has this about Ubuntu. He says that the national productivity drive must involve a communal approach. And by this, he says that it calls for a communal approach in all developmental programs. And this calls for community and team spirit. And we'd like to find out from you, what do you think about what Mzee Kenneth Kaunda says about the national productivity drive that must involve a communal approach to all developmental programs that calls for community and team spirit? Could you share your insights about that?
I think he was very right. He was very right. If you see, for example, what I talked about, Rukoga Rusangi, which happens on Saturday, it brings about people together. You know, so he's talking about national productivity and he's talking about communal approach to development programs. So when people come together, there is so much more that we can do together. Separated, we fall, you know, but united, we stand. So what happens in development, if we want our communities to develop, everyone in the community has a role to play. You know, even the young children, they have their role to play. The adolescents have their role to play. And if we bring all these heads together, we can be able to help our communities develop. Because remember, we already have the human resources. The human resources are each and every individual in that community. And if human resources are put well together, we can have the material resources to build the community. So it is true that when we look at the productivity, unless people come together, because if we constantly fight, we find that we are divided, we find that our community falls, we find that we are in constant conflict. And once we're in conflict, there is not much you can do, because everyone will be like, I'm right, I don't want to apologize, I don't want. So everyone is sticking to their side of the story, you know. But through Ubuntu, when we think about the value of others, when we think about the importance of our community, you know, because you know the community is not yours alone, the community is for you and others, then at the end of the day, we can be able to have development. Of course, it takes a lot, because you remember, different communities have a lot of issues which they have gone through, which cause trauma, which cause conflict, which cause the histories which can deter Ubuntuism. Because with development today, we find that it is more easier and simpler to think of me and my family rather than our community. So we are living in a society where we are just looking at, what can I do for myself? Where can I reach in society? And yet at the end of the day, yes, I may have progressed, but if I don't help others to progress, then at the end of the day, there is not much I'm doing to help my community. But if I can help another person to lift themselves up, then at the end of the day, we have now what we are calling the community development. We will have projects, we will have hospitals, we will have schools, we will have all these institutions which can be able to help the community reach the level of development which they anticipate.
Building on that, my next question is, what are the implications of Ubuntu to developmental social work from your understanding? What are the implications of Ubuntu to developmental social work?
Yes, I think when we look at developmental social work, we are looking at how we can bring progress and sustainable, not just progress, but sustainable progress, because we don't want that 1 year things are going well, and then the next year things are going down south. We want that there's sustainable development, that the community can be able to continue. The community can be able to continue progressing and continue moving forward. That today there's a school, tomorrow there's a hospital, the next day there's something, there's another project for the children, for the adolescents, for the women, for the men in the community. So when we look at developmental social work and Ubuntu, we look at, because remember, everyone has value. Not only I, whether I'm educated, whether there's someone who is not educated, everyone in our community can contribute to development. Because sometimes we think, no, only the educated can contribute. Even the one who is not educated has something which they were given, has a gift which they have, which they can bring to the society, which they can bring to the community and help develop. Just look at any community. You will always find the carpenter, you will find the shoemaker, you will find all these levels of work that are being done, not all of them with education, some of them with gifts, with passions. Look at, for example, today we look at baking. Baking is a passion. And today it can help in building the community. So when we bring all this, when we look at what everyone can bring to the table in terms of social work and development, we look at everyone being able to contribute with whatever little they have. It can be the human resource, it can be the material resource. And when we put this together, then we have our development, which we will be sustainable for the community.
All right, so we are now going to dive into a very interesting theme of discussion, and we are diving into Ubuntu Justice. And we'd like to find out, of course, Ubuntu Justice, it emphasizes deterrence, it emphasizes returning, it emphasizes replacement, compensation, apology, forgiveness, reconciliation. It emphasizes warnings and punishments. So could you comment about these principles of Ubuntu Justice from your understanding and experience? Could you explain and share some of your insights about it?
I think, yes, when we look at Ubuntu Justice, we are looking at what does justice mean in the society? It means that whatever has taken place needs to be accepted, needs to be acknowledged. That's why we are talking about apology. Needs to be recognized. That's why we are talking about returning and deterrence. And then there also needs to be warnings. That's what we're talking about, that in the future, we would not like this injustice which has taken place to occur. Now, remember, when we're talking about you are because I am because you are, I exist because you exist, we are because you are, all these look at also promoting justice, because area, if I would not be happy with you doing something wrong to me, why would I want it to occur to you? So it's all about, when you look at others, when you think about others, when you look at what has occurred, when you look at the injustice in the society, how would you as an individual react if it was injustice which was carried on to you? Now, remember, it is very important to acknowledge, because sometimes we hide injustice under the carpet. And when we hide it under the carpet, be sure that years from now, it will come, because we know that all these things which occur have time. It will be calm, but after some time, it will explode. That is the natural way of life. Those are the natural consequences. But if we look at Ubuntu Justice, and we are talking about deterring, returning, replacing, compensation, apology, it means we are acknowledging what occurred. It was not right. So there is punishment, for example. There are warnings, for example, so that another time people do not continue with the injustice which occurred, so that people can learn that if you would not want it to occur to you, then you would also not want this unfair behavior or unfair consequences on your neighbor who exists because you are there. Your work is to help them develop themselves. Yes.
My next question, building on that entire submission, is how can these justice principles of Ubuntu address inequality, discrimination, exclusion within communities, societies, and globally? How can we use these principles?
Yes, I think we go back to the root of Ubuntu, or what Ubuntu means, because if we always go back to the root, then we will look, for example, at addressing inequality. I would not want I myself would not want to be treated with inequality. So why would I want another to be treated with inequality? Because if you put yourself in another person's shoe, which is also a part of the principles of social work, empathy, understanding others, listening to others, So if you're able to understand another person, if you're able to empathize with them, it means that you're able to understand the injustice which has occurred. And if you're able to understand the injustice which has occurred, then you would want, for example, to fight for equality. You know, that if there are resources in the society, can all communities have access to them? Can we let go of this injustice of giving, for example, certain resources to one part and then marginalizing another part? On the same aspect, if we look at Ubuntu or the justice principles, it means that discrimination, we will not want to see discrimination occurring, because when you look at inequality, when we look at marginalization, when we look at discrimination, these are aspects which create an unjust society. And because Ubuntu is you are because I am, it means I would not like to promote marginalization. I would not like to promote exclusion in the society, because if you exclude, you're isolating people. This individual needs community support. These individuals need social support. These individuals need others so that they can exist. But if we start discrimination, exclusion, if we look at all these negative aspects or vices, then at the end of the day, it means we are creating a divide in the society, because marginalized people are usually placed on one side. You are marginalized, and us, we are the better people in the society. So that goes against the principles of justice of Ubuntuism. So at the end of the day, I think these are principles which we need to continue promoting. And of course, we know it's difficult. It's difficult to say that we're going to have everyone equal, but it does not stop us from trying. You know, it does not stop us from trying, so that we reduce the levels of inequality in our society, reduce the levels of marginalization. I think if we look at since independence and up to now, we can say maybe there's been some forms of percentages of inequality reduction, marginalization, but we need to continue working so that we bring people from the sidelines of society into the community, so that they can also experience Ubuntu, because we don't want to say that Ubuntu is for a certain group of people, you know. So even the marginalized, they need the Ubuntuism shown from the major or the larger group of people in the society, because we were looking for community sustainability. We are looking for community development, and community development does not promote exclusion, you know. And if we look at the principles of social work, principles of social works are work hand in hand with the principles of Ubuntu, because social work is against discrimination, marginalization of people, you know, all these negative aspects of society.
Right. Building on that submission you've shared, I would like to also pose this question to you. How can the use of Ubuntu be increased in laws, in organizational plans, in policies, in ethics curricula, as well as fieldwork manuals?
So when we look at the principles of Ubuntu, we are talking about valuing interconnectedness and community. And when we look at laws, plans, policies, ethics, curricula, and fieldwork manuals, sometimes we find that the person, an individual, is more, many of these might look at an individual more than the community. So I think in looking at laws, organizational plans, policies, ethics, and fieldwork, we need to bring into the aspect of the community. We need to bring into the aspect of valuing others, and we need to bring in the aspect of interconnectedness, that, you know, some of these policies and organizational plans, instead of promoting community, actually cause conflict in the organization, at the workplace, or at the level of the laws. So maybe policymakers need to go back and look at how to incorporate some of these principles. The way we talked about Zimbabwe, contextualizing and incorporating Ubuntu. If organizations maybe incorporate Ubuntu and governments incorporate Ubuntu, it might be able to help us to be able to promote this value which we are talking about. And this is the value of Ubuntuism. Because as it is now, there is more capitalism in most of our societies, or individualism, than this communal sustainable development. It's most about individual development.
All right, thank you so much for those insights that you've shared. And now we are going to delve into Ubuntu globally. And a few years ago, Ubuntu was recognized as a theme for social work by the IFSW and as well as by the International Association of Schools of Social Work. So how important was this to you, and how do we keep Ubuntu a priority at a global level?
Yes, I think as a social worker and an educator, this was very important to see that for the first time, an African philosophy was embraced widely. And yeah, it was very well embraced by the way we are talking about globally. And this shows that this group of academics, these organizations looked at Ubuntu and saw that there is something critical that Ubuntu can teach us. Remember, these are things that Ubuntu has been there all along. It is now just because it became now, what can I say? It became now published and known, but we have had Ubuntu occurring in our societies. So this was very important because now we can be able to teach about Ubuntu. Now we can be able, because we've had quite a number of productions on Ubuntuism. We've had quite a number of articles being written on Ubuntu. We've had quite a number of contributions being done on Ubuntu. And this has enabled Ubuntu, or because of these publications, articles, this can now be incorporated in the class and be now taught to students as these aspects of culture, which they knew, but now they can read about them. You understand? Because they practice this, but now it is being shown to them that these are very important aspects in our
culture. Right. Thank you so much. And my next question is very interesting, by the way. So, and it says, can Ubuntu coexist with Western individualism?
Yes.
Can Ubuntu coexist with Western individualism? Do you think so? And why do you think so?
Yes. I think this is it's a very, as you have said, it's a very interesting question, because remember the principles of Ubuntu look at community, look at interconnectedness, look at valuing each other. But remember, even if we're talking about community, valuing each other, interconnectedness, it does not mean that the individual does not ceases to exist. The individual exists, but Ubuntu looks at the individual becoming an individual because of others around. You understand? Because as we talked, when we started talking, we talked about development and we looked at the different stages of development. A child, when they're a child, they need the society around them. They need all this community. And these are the people who are going to give us the children we see today. I think even Sigmund Freud mentioned, and he said this, give me a child at an early age. He didn't want the older ones because by then you have already been established. And he said, I will be able to give you a good or a bad person, showing that the society is critical. Community is critical. Now, when we look at the Western individualism, we need to be careful because the individualism in the West is at a very high level, at a very high level, sometimes even to the expense of the society. And that's why it might be difficult to coexist, because one goes at an extreme extent, and Ubuntu is more of looking at, yes, you're an individual, but an individual with others. Yes, you're an individual, but an individual with connection with others. Yes, you're an individual, but an individual in a community. So I'm not sure if they can coexist unless the Western individualism learns from some of these concepts of Ubuntu, and maybe let's go of some certain level of the individualism, because you find that at the end of the day, a person is in somehow in isolation, and this goes against Ubuntu. because Ubuntu looks at development, sustainable development with others, not development apart from others, which is capitalism. Of course, yes, you work for me, I get my money from you, and that is it, you know? So the capitalism, building and development and individualism at the expense of others in the society. At the end of the day, that goes against the principles of Ubuntu. So it might be difficult for them to coexist. I think we need to learn from each other. Western individualism needs to borrow a leaf from Ubuntu. Yes.
Right. Thank you so very much for that wonderful submission. And my next question to you is, should Ubuntu be taught to outsiders, or it is only meaningful within its cultural context?
I think I think this was a theme that was accepted globally, and we have looked at Western individualism. I would support that it should be taught. It should be taught to outsiders, and then they can see now how to contextualize it. You know, like what we are talking about, social work, which came from out, and then we are trying to look at how to contextualize it. They can look at Ubuntu and then see how to contextualize it in the Western countries, so that, because these are principles which are very fundamental for sustainable development. These are principles which are fundamental in social support systems. These are principles which are fundamental in promoting an individual who is going to play a role in the society. So at the end of the day, it is very important for others around to be able to know about it and then see how they can be able to contextualize it within their different countries. Because if you look at, even for example, Brazil, you look at this other South America, North America, all these countries have certain aspects. You may find that there are certain aspects of Ubuntu which can be found. It is now to be able to look at, okay, if we look at interconnectedness, how can we promote this in our society? If we look at valuing each other, how can we promote it? But yet at the end of the day, promote sustainable development. Because remember, we learn from each other. And we should not just say that this society, what they're practicing is wrong, this one is bad. We can look and see, okay, this is positive. What can we learn from this? This is negative. Okay, this one we can let go. You know, we go learning from each other so that we can build each other's societies.
All right, thank you so much for that submission. And my next question is about the Africans in the diaspora. Of course, we know we have very many Africans in the diaspora. So how and where they are in the diaspora, many of them are facing different challenges. And according to the book of The Souls of the Black Folk, the theory of double consciousness was born to explain the challenge of balancing Ubuntu in the diaspora, because there are two competing philosophies. We have individualism, we have capitalism in the diaspora especially. So, and more other conflicting theories that occur in the diaspora. So how should the Africans in the diaspora keep engaging with Ubuntu, and what are the opportunities and challenges for this?
Yes, I think the way Du Bois explained, they face challenges. They face challenges, and not just the diaspora, but even currently people who go there, you know, many face a cultural clash. Many find it hard to survive, and it takes them time to fit in. And if you're looking at African diaspora and engaging with Ubuntu, I think what we are learning today is that we have become we are in a globalized society where we are able to be in contact with one another quite frequently. For example, I am in Burundi, you are in a different country, you are in Uganda, we may have someone from Zimbabwe. So we have technology today which can help us to engage with our African diaspora and promote Ubuntuism. And that is in terms of how Africans can help the African diaspora to promote or to continue with the principles of Ubuntu or engage in Ubuntu. And for them, in the different countries where they are, I think it would be important for them to create communities where they can be able to engage with each other I think I have found that when you go somewhere and you're able to get people from your community, even if you might not know them, but once you are in a far country, they become your brother and your sister, you know? So I think it's important for the Africans in diaspora to look for communities around them, which can help them to continue engaging with Ubuntu. Because remember, because these are aspects of our culture which we carry, you will find that the other community members or other people from different African countries whom you find will be able to understand the Ubuntu, which might be different from colleagues from the Western countries. Yeah, so this can be a good way for them. First, the use of technology today, creating online communities, which can help in engaging in Ubuntu, and then physically on the ground, looking for communities which can be able to help them to be able to continue engaging with community.
All right, thank you so much for that beautiful submission. And we are going to our other question, and the question states that what values of Ubuntu or principles of Ubuntu would you wish the world to learn about Ubuntu?
The principles of values, I think I have been mentioning them. First, I would like people to learn about the value of everyone in the society. Yes. Another is that everyone has something to add in the society. That means whether educated, whether not educated, whether physically challenged, whether physically okay, everyone has something to add in the society. An aspect of community that we exist because of our communities. Communities are very important, and it is important for us to know how to build our communities to promote sustainable development and for the future generations. Because remember, as I mentioned before, it's not just about us who are here now, but even the people to come. Because Ubuntu looks at how do we leave the community for others? And then the importance of interconnection, because in some of I think that because of the Western individualism, there is a lot of isolation. And today, we see that isolation is causing a lot of depression, signaling to us, or implications of this are that a social support system is very, very important, because depression lives or survives in isolation. So it's very important for the world to know that interconnection is very key and very important, because when you're connected with others, I think it's easy for people to follow up and reduce some of the mental health issues which we're having today, which come as a result of stress in the environment, isolation in the environment, and other factors in the environment. And if we look at the global levels of depression, I think it is sad what levels of depression we are reaching today, simply because, of course, I will not just say that it is only this aspect of social support, but this is one of the aspects which are very important. So I think those are the values which I would like the world to know about Ubuntu.
Thank you so very much for that submission. And we have actually come to the close of our discussion, and would like you to share a proverb or a saying about Ubuntu that you would wish maybe the world to learn about from you or from your country and its meaning.
Okay, so I mentioned it before, and I said umunu ni umunu n'abantu. This means a person is a person through other persons, through other people. A very important aspect in the country of Burundi, at the heart of Africa.
Thank you so much. I don't know, do you have anything else you'd wish to share or anything else you'd wish to say?
Not so much, but I would like people who get an opportunity to read books on Ubuntu. Now we have very many African authors who have written on Ubuntu. We have from South Africa, we have from East Africa. And East Africa, we even have from Makerere University. I think Dr. Janestic has, we've collaborated with her and written on some things on Ubuntu. So I think I would encourage people to look especially our African counterparts, to look online for some of these books and at least promote Ubuntu in their schools. Because if we're looking at social work, we're looking at social work at the higher level, at the higher institution level. So I would encourage lecturers to talk about Ubuntu in their classes and encourage their students to read about Ubuntu. Most of these publications can be found online. If students and lecturers can go online, they can be able to get this. For example, I can mention one of our books, which we looked at, and it is looking at indigenous social work practice in Africa, indigenous and innovative approaches. And then it looks at different African countries and different indigenous approaches which can be used to be able to develop their community and to be able to develop their societies. Then we also have a publication, Decolonizing Teaching and Research, which was looking at social work students in different contexts. And we have many others from within the African countries, because today quite a number are publishing. So it is important for us to be able to not just talk about Ubuntu, but also teach about Ubuntu so that it can continue being a philosophy which can have an impact on future generations.
All right. Thank you so very much, Susan, for sharing your insights about Ubuntu and how Ubuntu is experienced in Burundi. And we are very appreciative for having taken enough time to be part of this discussion. And we believe that the rest of the world and other researchers who would wish to research about Ubuntu are going to learn about Ubuntu in an insightful way. And they will, of course, based on this knowledge, to do their research and write good articles and good publications about Ubuntu. Thank you so very much, and I wish you the very best of the day.
Okay, thank you too. Have a good day.
All right.